Hello and welcome back to Deep Sleep Creep's YouTube channel. Today we're going to be listening to 3 almost being kidnapped horror stories. Fair warning, story 3 involves a man exposing himself, so if you don't want to listen to that, then go ahead and skip it. Now let's go deep. Hey everyone, let me tell you the story of how I think I was mistaken for an underage girl and believe this creep tried kidnapping me. For some context, I'm 23 female, and while I do have to dodge the occasional creep, it's moments like this that make me question whether or not humanity has any hope, and debate if anyone can actually be trusted. I am 4 feet 11 inches. I know I'm very petite, but trust me, I make up for it with my fury and resting bitch face. Anyway, I go running at the track not far from where I live. Not even really for the intent of exercising. It's more of a way for me to decompress, to daydream and run off the day's frustrations. My legs were burning after I did about a mile and had to sit on a bench to catch my breath. I was scrolling and looking for another playlist on my iPod, all while debating if I was going to do any further running, while a man came out of nowhere and had a seat next to me. He was extremely large, both in stature and body weight, somewhere in the ballpark of 6 feet 4 inches. He could have easily squished me like a bug. I didn't pay him much mind, or at least tried not to. It was especially hard given the ample amount of park benches around the track that were unoccupied. He said something, but I could barely hear him with my AirPods in. I took them out and asked him to repeat himself. He said, "I said they don't make them the way they are when I was your age." I was confused, but not really confused. I just gave him a blank stare, like I couldn't be bothered by it. He went on to say things like, "Bodies are changing, and if I had a girlfriend like you." After continuing to not say anything to him, he asked if my parents were okay with me being in the park alone, and asked what time my curfew was. I laughed at him and joked it was 11. I think he took me seriously. Anyway, he then started rambling about my butt and my boobs, implying that I was extremely advanced for my age. Dude, I'm small. And yes, I have boobs. And what age did this man think I was? At that point, he was pissing me off. I must have shown it too, which is why he held up his hands and said, "Hey, don't give me that look. I can appreciate a sexy body, can't I? There's no law against that." At that point, I figured the best course of action would be to leave before I introduced my fist to his face. So I got up to leave and he stood up after me. He asked if he could take me out for food, but I ignored him and kept walking. I went near the bathroom where they have a set of wall lockers and got my things. I also made a pit stop in the bathroom for obvious reasons. When I left, I started making my way to my car, but he was on the sidewalk not far away from my vehicle. I made the long loop around so that I wouldn't have to pass near him. As I'm about to get in my car, he calls out to me and says, "Oh, so you can drive?" I don't know if that was disappointment to figure out that I was older than he thought or whatever. I stopped and gave him the dirtiest look I could. At that point, he grabbed my arm and said, "Oh, that doesn't matter, baby. Come on, let's go somewhere." I was stunned. Was this guy delusional or something? I had a really bad feeling about this situation. I don't know why, but I panicked and had this strong feeling like he wanted to kidnap me. So with that, I pulled out my pepper spray from my pocket and he jumped far back. Excellent, I thought. I dashed to my car and locked the doors. He made a motion for me to stop, but I didn't. I also had my hand on my revolver, which I don't think he knew about. I didn't think it was that extreme of a case yet, but screw it. I'd rather ask for forgiveness. As I was trying to pull out of my parking spot, he wouldn't let me. He stayed firm behind my car. At that point, I was seriously contemplating on running him over. I figured it's better to run a creep over than shoot him with my gun, right? I honestly don't know how that defense would hold up in court. I know pepper spraying is okay. I should also mention I'm very short-tempered and have been known to have anger issues. Instead, I slowly backed up and made it obvious I didn't give 2 flying fucks if I ran him over. He got the hint and moved out of the way and called me a crazy bitch. I smiled at that. Finally, I drove off and hoped that that was the last I'd see him. The reason I'm sharing this experience in the first place is because I got a card in the mail and surprise. There's a registered sex offender in my neighborhood that committed crude acts towards an 11-year-old girl, And guess whose black and white picture was in the corner? No more than that creepy park guy. I'll come up with a better name for him later, but that's what I'm going with for now. Did he think I was around that age? I looked him up further in the court public records, and I got sick to my stomach when I realised he did attempt to kidnap the 11-year-old girl, and luckily they found her after 3 days of going missing. I can't imagine the trauma that poor child had to endure. It made me wonder what if he was serious and able to take me. He had the physical capabilities to do so. Thank God for my pepper spray and to myself for being smart. I filed a police report that afternoon. I told them he was at a public park and possibly thought I was a minor. Come to think of it, if he's a registered sex offender, especially towards minors, aren't they not allowed to go near parks? Wouldn't that violate their probation or something? Anyway, I don't know, but the officers said they'd look into it. But judging by how they took my report, I hold out little hope. Be careful out there. I don't care what age you are. Some people are just dangerous. Also, if you were to carry any form of self-protection, the least you can do, as a woman, is carry around a pepper spray. I also have a hidden knife and taser that I didn't mention earlier. I'm big on protection. Stay safe out there. So this will be a much longer story. Fair warning. My friend and I started going to summer camp in 2019 so that we can conduct surveys every summer based on the topic we'll be discussing, so we get better public speaking arrangements and more generalised opinions from others in the area. This was all for a private school we went to, which I'd rather not share very much online. Me and my friend, let's call her Mia, teamed up with 2 camp counsellors and hit the town. Our last stop was a Walmart, and we talked to a bunch of different people. The most memorable was the third to last, an older man that asked for our names and all about us after he finished answering our questions. At the time, we were both 13 with hardly any concept of stranger danger, so we gladly answered about ourselves. Anyway, a few days later, an account popped up on our friend requests called Ed_Pat. The account liked a bunch of old posts, commented with a bunch of fire and rose emojis, and called us hot and sexy on our posts. It got to the point where they started to send nudes. So, me and my friend ended up blocking the account. Only a few days later, the account was permanently deleted. It didn't show up in our searches for it. That's why we thought it was the end of it. Well, sadly it was not. When we finally got back to school in August, we basically forgot the event altogether. Yet again, this time on both of our Facebook accounts, we got a notification from someone named Ed Pat wanting to be our friend. Immediately blocked that account again, but not before they had already commented gross things on my baby pictures. Commented on how pretty my baby blonde hair was, how I looked good in short dresses, etc. After that, we both talked to our parents about the situation, and other than keeping our accounts private, there wasn't much else we could really do. The cops shrugged it off and said just to take the app down completely. But hey, we're teens. Of course we didn't do that. Over the years, till around the end of 2021, this man kept sending friend requests from different accounts with similar variations of their names, which sort of made us laugh with how it was a bit stupid that he did that, but whatever. Though, at the beginning of 2022, this is where it starts to get really creepy. Accounts with the names and pictures of our friends started showing up in our notifications, so obviously we added them thinking it was our friends. We were wrong. Almost immediately, most of our posts had likes or comments on them from this account, and there were multiple DMs of dick pics to both of us. We blocked the account again. This became an ever-exhausting recurring cycle. An account with friends' info, pictures and mutual friends would get hacked, stolen, duplicated, etc. Just so they could friend us again and again without us worrying too much about it. Finally, it got to the point we stopped adding people from our school at all, even friends. The final time this happened was in the summer of 2022. The swarm of fake accounts had stopped roughly 2 months prior, and seeing as this friend request looked legit by a school friend, I decided to try it out. My friend didn't. She was still wary, but I decided to give it a shot. The compromise was to fully delete our socials and get new ones if this account turned out the same. I was definitely a stupid 17-year-old, but try not to judge me too harshly. Now, this account didn't spam our pictures, didn't DM us dick pics, just interacted with us like any normal school kid would. A like here and there on new posts, a like on a story posted, never commented on posts. So finally we thought it was over. Funny was I wrong. Strange things started to happen and became more of an intentional thing than a coincidence. I would post a picture of me and a friend at the park. A couple minutes later, a white truck pulled up in the lot. Eerily close to my car, the driver's side door, but we tried not to think too much of it. There were still a few spaces over. Me and my friend were on the swings, basically in a straight line of sight of the parking lot. The truck lights remained on, pointed at us, for a long time. It got to the point that me and my friend finally started getting worried and anxious. So we hopped off the swings and decided to take laps around the park instead. The car was far too close to mine for us to be comfortable getting to it in time. Mind you, it was about 10 p.m. at night, so we were the only ones there. We waited and roamed the park for nearly an hour before the truck finally drove away. That's when we raced to my car and I drove home, looking behind me frequently just in case. Luckily, I didn't see a vehicle following us, and I'd noticed since it was 10 at night and no one was on the road. This happened in early June and it kept happening. I didn't really notice it, thought it was a one-off occurrence. It never dawned in my head that it happened after I posted pictures or said where I was with friends, but I started to see a white truck just about anywhere I posted my location. Even one that would wait outside my high school when I posted a story about my walk to my mum's store only a mile from our school. Again, young and dumb, I didn't think the worst of it. I thought it was a parent waiting for a kid. Plus, there were a bunch of people that own all kinds of variations of white trucks in my town. So I never put much worry into seeing them all the time. My friend never mentioned any white truck, and if we were together we rarely saw any of them. But I started to get nervous of them. After one time I was walking to my mum's store, I decided to take a glance at the driver of the truck that sat near the car line every day after school. It was the same, if not a bit older, man from our Walmart survey trip in 2019. It was bizarre, definitely. We were never expecting to see him again, especially since we met him in a few towns over from our own. Yet long and behold, he was right there. That's when I walked, probably ran actually, to my mum's store. This kept happening, and I finally knew I was being stalked after seeing him that first time because I saw him everywhere on foot. Anyway, I'll fast forward to the last bit that happened on the last day of our shared summer camp experience in late July 2023. At this point I was still 17, and since I was older than most of the new campers, I might as well have been considered a staff member. I drove kids to camp and home every night, and they paid me for the gas money, so I was cool with doing it. Didn't bother me, since they were in the same town as me and there were others farther away that the counsellors typically drove home. This day, I posted all the pictures of the last day of camp right before I left so I could try and save my phone that was suffering from glitches, lack of data, and didn't let me communicate or call others because my storage was too full. So I photo dumped a bunch of stuff, but it didn't fix the problem. My phone was essentially broken all the time. It hardly worked, and I bought my current phone after this occurrence. On top of this, one of the older campers that visited on the last day, who was an 18-year-old male, didn't have a phone either, but he was also in the car with me. In the back seat, I had 3 campers. One didn't have a phone either, and the other 2 were dead. One was charging theirs with my carport. I know, in 2023, how could there be this many people without a working phone? I guess it was the perfect storm. As I pulled off the back road of our camp up to the intersection, the light turned green and we went forwards. In the lane next to us was a white truck that kept turning its brights on and off. It was a bit weird, so I sped up because once again, I didn't think much of it. Side note, my best friend Mia has a baby. Mia had her kid at 15, so at this point her kid was nearly a year old. Still very fussy in car rides and such. This becomes important later, because Mia was there for the last day of camp too. She left right before we did when her baby started to become fussy. Eventually I don't see the white truck behind me anymore and I slowed down a bit. It was nearly 9:30 p.m. at this point, late enough for the highway between our towns to be essentially empty. I have this back road that is a bit curvy that leads close to my house and directly to a rich neighborhood. It's the streets I typically take to get back to my house from camp if I had no one to take home, and everyone that was a regular in my car called it the detour. It was quite pretty, with a bunch of full evergreen trees and wildlife. The kids, well, not really kids, one 13 female and two 15-year-old males in the back were begging me to go on the detour since it was the last day of camp. So I caved in and hit on my blinker, turning right onto the back road. Now, listen, I'm not the safest person out there, don't judge me. I'm still basically a kid too, but all the ones in the back love to hang out the windows on the back road. So I let them stick their heads out the sunroof, sit on the windowsill while holding the bars on top of my car. I went slow, under 10 miles per hour, just so they could do it and not worry about them getting hurt. I mean, there was no one on the back roads. Cops never camped out on these streets, and I was going under the speed limit by like 20, so there wasn't really any harm in letting them stick out the windows. Eventually, I let them bully me into taking them around the rich neighborhoods that had cool water fountains and covered bridges on their streets. Apparently, one of the covered bridges caved in, so we had to go around on this super narrow street right next to a large drainage ditch at least 15 to 20 feet deep. As we are going around it, a car comes up behind us. I assumed it was one of the people who lived in the neighborhood, so I was going to speed up to let them get to their house. Finally, we came to the four-way intersection of the rich people street. Straight forward was a dead end, which is what I originally was going to do. To the left was the broken covered bridge, and to the right was a back roundabout that would take us back to the beginning of the street. But it had no houses, lights back there because the neighborhood is still being built. But let's call him Jake. An 18-year-old male told me to go right. Mind you, one of the campers was sticking their body out of my skylight from the back seat so I couldn't see out of my review mirror. I didn't really want to, but I trusted his instincts and turned right. As soon as I did, I started to hear honking behind me. I was a bit startled, and so were the kids in the back seat. I glance out in my side view mirrors, but I can't see anything past the bright LED lights. I thought it was just because I took too long, so I sped up a bit after I turned right. There was a sharp curve at the end of a hill on this back street, and it makes you tug the steering wheel pretty hard to stay on the road, especially in the dark. The car behind me turned right too. They started flashing their LED brights, honking loudly, and had rolled down windows screaming at us. They kept trying to get in the lane next to us and bump into my car to run us off the road. That is when I knew this was serious. Instantly, I started screaming at the kids in the back seat to sit down, buckle up, and roll up their windows. They barely managed to do that by the time I hit the sharp curve at the end of the hill really hard and gunned it off the street, driving around the drainage ditch with little problem. I've done it multiple times. There was no phone in the car to call anyone, least of all the police, so I just ended up speeding down the back streets as the car chased me, trying to run me off the road multiple times. When we came upon sharp corners, they slowed down. That told me they didn't know the area well, which I used to my advantage. As I was approaching a stop sign, for me to go left or right, my house was to the right, so left it was. I yelled at Jake to check my right because I'm not stopping for the sign. I sped past it. At this point, I disturbingly found out that what I was dealing with was another white truck that tried to hit my bumper again, and I swerved into someone else's yard. I booked it down the street, hitting every turn as fast as possible, and eventually I thought I lost the truck. I sped past my high school and onto the highway again, where we got off in the first place. I didn't see the truck behind us, and we were all still freaked out. I took a right to go onto another main way and passed by a closed gas station on the way, which is a very important part of the story later. I stopped at another gas station and handed the kids in the back some cash for them to go get themselves a drink and a snack to help them calm down. None of them were crying, thank God, but what adrenaline junkies, I thought. They thought it was more exciting than anything, as they were laughing about how cool that was and how I have sick driving skills. I told Jake to go watch them in the store and make sure they didn't do anything stupid while I filled up my gas tank. We waited at the gas station for about 20 minutes, before I went back onto the road to take them home, just in case. I asked them if they had seen the car at all while they were hanging out the windows, and only one of them said they thought they did, but the truck's lights were off. It was the same truck from a town or so over, from the intersection in front of the back road to our camp, which meant they followed us for nearly 25 minutes. After I dropped all of them off, I was still a bit shaky and decided to try and see if my phone would call someone that I could talk to about what happened. The only contact that would load was Mia's, since she was the last person I had talked to on our phones. With a stroke of luck, my phone actually let me call her. She picked up, but all I could hear from her side of the line was her crying. Obviously panicking, I asked her what was wrong, and long and behold, she shares a story eerily similar to what just happened to me. Apparently, Mia's baby started crying so loud she could barely focus on the road, so she pulled into the closed gas station that I mentioned earlier. Right outside our high school, I sped past. She was giving her kid their bottle when a white truck pulled into the lot. Immediately, she was weary because it was closed, and she was right. Less than 30 seconds later, this truck parked horizontally in front of Mia's car to block her in. She immediately started the car again, locked her doors, and pulled off over the grass curb, blocking her from the street. She was not chancing her baby at all. Mia told me the only thing she remembered was that it was the same man we had seen years ago in that Walmart, his eyes staring at her like she was just a piece of meat for him to have. As she raced home, the truck caught up to her. She turned onto her back road, running out of gas, and the truck started to flash its lights, honk, run her off the road the entire time. But a couple streets before hers, a little red car pulled out in front of her and started to brake check her as the white truck tried to hit her from behind. It was a mess. She took a chance, sped up, and swung onto her street to at least lose the red car. The truck booked it after her. Apparently, both of her older brothers were waiting outside for her with some of their friends to help her bring in stuff for her baby. Upon seeing this, as she pulled into her driveway, the white truck sped off. If her brothers weren't outside, that might have been a different story. But anyway, long story short, the truck that followed me all the way back had an accomplice in a red car that followed my friend Mia. When they couldn't catch me, they went for her. Both me and Jake suspected that because I didn't go onto the dead end where the man could cut me off, that's probably why it suddenly got violent so quickly. If you want more of my story times that sound a bit crazy but sadly true, comment below. Also, I never mentioned what happened after this, but the man in the white truck and the other in the little red car were found a town over when there was footage taken of them attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old off a porch and being attacked by her dog. Along with this, we found that there had been several sightings of a white truck around our town following others doing similar things days after it first happened to us, such as following cars that had a similar description to me and my friends' cars. We think they were trying to find us. Our reports were officially filed after we saw the information of the car on Facebook, along with the identity of the man that had stalked us for years. It took years to get rid of them, but we now don't have to worry about the men anymore as they were caught and arrested. I'm glad no one got hurt, but when you had as many red flags as I did, make sure you take action. Don't shrug it off like I did, especially when I noticed the man from Walmart was in the white truck. I should have done something then, but now I know better. This probably happened when I was around 5 or 6 years old. I'm 22 now. For a while I thought that I had just made this memory up, and that it didn't actually happen, until more recently, where I unlocked more of the memory after driving past the bookstore where I had this scary encounter and asked my mum about it. She was stunned that I forgot about it and told me the whole story. When I was little, my mum used to take me to Indigo, which is like Chapters or Barnes and Nobles, so she could browse around and read while I played in the children's area of the store. Mind you, she never left me alone. I was always in her vicinity. Anyway, this one particular time we had gone, I was roaming around the children's area, just browsing the toys and children's books. I was riding around on one of those little scooters they had in the store, aimlessly and happily. The store was almost empty because it was near closing time. My mom was sitting in the center of this area reading a book she had just picked up. I rode around and had made my way through the aisles to the back corner of the children's area, and bumped into a man's leg. I was startled, but he didn't move when I bumped into him, so I looked up. When I looked up, I was utterly mortified. This man was standing in the back corner, pleasuring himself. His pants were slightly pulled down, and his thing was so pink-red that it looked raw. He was a white man, probably in his 50s, with piercing blue eyes. He didn't say anything. He just looked me in my eyes while doing his thing and smiled. I tried to run, but this man grabbed my arm and said, "Where are you going?" And this is normal. "Want to go to the back of the bookstore?" I saw a lot of new children's books that came in. Disturbed and mortified, I didn't know what else to do as he was trying to pull me away other than to scream. I screamed at the top of my lungs and started crying because I was so scared. That startled him, and he left instantly. My mum saw him and ran towards him, but he was much faster than my mum. My mum asked me what happened, and at that time I couldn't speak. I was so disturbed. I was shaken, and she didn't want to ask any more questions and thought taking me out for ice cream to calm down would help. Well, it did. But I didn't tell her the experience until later, and she was also mortified when I told her about a man holding his ding-dong. As a child, I didn't understand what he was doing, but I knew it was wrong. This interaction was probably less than a minute, but I still think about it to this day. Also, I don't know why I didn't realize this, but after I told her, we never went back to that bookstore again. Until I drove past it today and was shocked at the memory I unlocked. Thankfully, my mum was always near me, but it could have ended pretty badly if she was further away. That's why I taught my kids at a young age to use their voice and scream if they're in danger. Luckily, nothing like this happened to them, but they're young, and I'm not out of the woods yet. Stay safe and always keep an eye on your kids. There are too many freaks lurking around every corner.